What's up YouTube community, Bernd here, welcome back to another video lesson. Today's episode is gonna be a lot of fun. You guys and girls voted for the topic of shredding once again on the lesson wishlist on Patreon for this month. To be more precise, I will show you 3 awesome shred tricks that you can use to get that neoclassical sound for your music and licks. So let's not waste any more time and start shredding right away. So with today's lesson, I don't just want you to learn and study the practical example that I composed and recorded for this one. I also really want you to understand how each trick works in detail so you can use them for your own music and for your own licks from now on. But before we dissect each one of those really helpful tricks in extreme detail, let's check out the short composition I prepared for today. As always, you can download the detailed tabs, guitar profiles and practice backing tracks for this composition on patreon.com/Bernd. In case you didn't already know, aside from voting on the lesson topics, my patrons also get to download the tabs, guitar profiles and practice backing tracks for all of my YouTube lessons. So make sure to check out my shred guitar community on Patreon today if that sounds interesting for you. You can also get some personal feedback from me in case you need some further assistance with certain techniques or theory approaches. But let's get to work right now and check out each trick in detail. So the most common ways of visualizing a scale on the guitar is usually with the 2 notes per string approach for the pentatonic scales, the minor pentatonic scale for example. I'm sure you're familiar with that one already. Or with 3 notes per string for the natural minor scale for example. This 3 note per string approach is of course used very frequently with all kinds of shred licks. As I'm sure you know by now, if you watched some of my videos already, that extra note per string really makes it much easier to speed up certain phrases and also to get more creative with the lick writing itself. But another really cool way of visualizing scales on the guitar is something we did not look into that much on this channel yet. Of course, we can also visualize the entire scale on just one string, and that way we can come up with some really cool patterns. So for the first shred trick and for the first very cool lick that I was playing, I was actually just visualizing the A minor scale on the high E string from A right here on the 5th fret all the way up to B right here on the 19th fret. As soon as you worked on your fretboard visualization a bit, you can really see those scales on one string starting from the root A for example. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B and so on. But this is my highest note for the first lick. And instead of just playing the scale up or down, like that for example, or in the other direction, going back down, which actually kind of sounds neoclassical already, I was working with a more interesting pattern, starting with the lowest note of each position, then going up to the highest note, descending and then switching to the next position and so on. So that sounds really cool as soon as you speed it up, and it instantly reminds me of the sound of classical music. This one is also an amazing hand synchronization exercise since you're playing a different note with your left hand for every single picking stroke. And of course the biggest challenge is lining up the correct note with each picking stroke, and the lick shouldn't sound like that. That doesn't really sound too good, and I hope you can hear the difference. Here I was just trying to move my left hand as fast as possible and my right hand as fast as possible without focusing on the synchronization of both hands. So once again, my biggest and most important suggestion with this lick is practicing it to a metronome, because you can focus on syncing the first note of each sequence, of each position, with each click of the metronome if you're letting it count quarter notes for you. So here I was really just focusing on the first note of each sequence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And if those notes are played in time, meaning in sync with each click of the metronome, it's much easier to line up the rest of the notes correctly and to really nail the note spacing in between them. The second trick I want to show you that will immediately add a more neoclassical sound to your licks is adding chromatic notes and chromatic ornamentations. So at the ending of the first lick, I already added a short semi-chromatic run from the 5th to the 8th fret on the high E and the B string. So that one isn't that interesting. We already looked at adding chromatic notes and chromatic phrases to your solos, but the concept that is much more interesting and immediately gets you that classical sound is adding chromatic ornamentation notes to the notes of your scale. So when I play this basic scale phrase for you, A, B, C, D, up to E, it doesn't really sound like classical or neoclassical music, but as soon as I add that small chromatic ornamentation to the root, to A, on the 7th fret on the D string, playing G sharp, so 1 fret below that, it immediately has that classical or neoclassical sound. So that trick sounds really cool and it's super easy to use for your own music. I included a couple of variations for this trick in the composition, so you have some reference material to get started. Make sure to work on and to memorize all those variations with the tabs and guitar profiles I provided on Patreon for this lesson. And the last trick I'd like to show you today is definitely the hardest one, but it really pays off working on this. To get a big and satisfying climax for this small composition, I was working with fast 3-note per string shred licks on the B and high E string in the end. So switching between the two higher strings quickly and ascending with the shapes really has a quite dramatic sound for the ending of this section. When you practice fast 3-note per string licks like that, always pay attention to your picking angle. The trickiest part of this lick for me is not getting stuck with the pick between the B and E string. Right now the pick is stuck right in the middle between those strings and I have to jump over the B string in order to perform a downstroke once again, and that results in a dead note or an inconsistent pattern when you're picking, and that's something you really want to avoid. So playing with that kind of angle instead of that angle is a bit easier for that lick, especially for the ending of the lick, because now my pick can escape from the strings and it's not stuck between those two strings anymore, and I'm not touching the B string with the upstroke when I try to reposition my pick for the downstroke on the B string. So please make sure to make your life easier by paying close attention to the angle of your pick when you're playing. Sometimes a small adjustment with difficult licks makes a big difference. I really hope that you will learn and attempt to play this section. It's actually a lot of fun and not as hard as it looks, especially the first and the second part. Make sure to download the tabs and guitar profiles on Patreon to get started practicing right now. In the end, also make sure to subscribe to join this guitar community today. That way you will never miss another free video lesson like that again. We are very close to reaching our community goal of 100,000 subscribers for this year, so you can really help me out by subscribing, liking or commenting in case you have any open questions. If you would like to support this channel and the creation of more guitar lessons like that, you can also check out the merch on Teespring. As always, I left a link in the description. Thanks a lot for checking it out and for your continued support. I will hopefully see you again in the next video lesson. All the best and have a lot of fun working on this until then.